Cool. Well, welcome to another episode of The Green Room. I'm super excited today to be joined by Steve Vamos. Steve, welcome to The Green Room.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
So, obviously, Steve, this book, through Shifts and Shocks, came out in 2024. I know this is very much kind of the focus of, I guess, what you're doing now, but looking at your kind of rap sheet and your past, it's 4 decades of tech disruption. You held executive leadership roles across IBM, Apple, Microsoft, and then was the leader and CEO of Xero, I think between 2018 and 2023. Your work's taken you all across the world, it seems. Just talking about my home country, New Zealand, where you've recently been based, obviously here in Australia, Asia and the US as well. So, I'm super excited to talk to you about the principles of the book today. Obviously we're at a time of really intense change right now, and I think this is just an amazing practical guide for leaders and CEOs and anyone kind of facing adversity and change. So maybe just as a starting point, I'd love to get your opinion. Having lived through a lot of change, 4 decades of technological change. Does this feel different? Because, certainly in my lifetime, it feels like the rate of change we're kind of going through at the moment seems to be kind of crazy and insane. But is this sort of like routine change for you? How do you kind of see, how AI is kind of shaping not just technology, but the kind of way we live as humans as well?
Yeah, well, look, it's definitely an exciting time, and another, if you look at AI, it's another very, very significant step in the evolution of what technology makes possible. But I think that one thing that I think is really important to sort of ground the conversation is that if I look at the 40 plus years I've been in the tech industry, from originally the big wave of change that I first experienced was when mini computers arrived.
Yeah.
That meant putting computers into mid-sized organisations that up to that point had been run on essentially manual processes. But if I look at all the ways of change through the PC, client server, the internet, social media, everything that's led up to today, there's one thing that I really believe and I try and anchor every conversation in, which is that it's not about technology as much as it is about people. Mm-hmm. See, technology doesn't innovate yet. Maybe one day it will.
Yep.
It's people who do.
Yep.
Technology hasn't disrupted any industry, if you have a real think about it. It's people who have. Mm. It's people who took new technology, put that together with an aspiration or belief that things could be better, and challenged the status quo. And in fact, often in industries like retail, technology, media, these startups with nothing overcame the position of leaders that have been around for decades with everything. So it's really important to appreciate that what technology has done is to amplify the potential of people.
Yeah.
And AI is another step up in that domain. What humans are able to do now, given what is evolving, is greater than ever before because you got access to more knowledge, you got access to more other people of similar interests than ever before. And that means change is the outcome. Humans are driving change at a scale faster than we ever have before.
And you kind of think about, AI and, you think on the front end, consumer-wise, like tools like ChatGPT, Claude Code, it's kind of enabling creative thinkers and people who perhaps don't have haven't had the foundational skills to learn how to program or create software applications, have an idea and be able to transform that kind of into a working prototype. And hey, maybe you can't scale it to tens and hundreds of thousands of people, maybe you can, but certainly I agree that if you kind of look at the technological change we're going through now, creativity is like more, and I think about what we do in terms of like advertising, everything's kind of leaning towards more focus on kind of creativity, more so than kind of ever.
It really has to, the fact of our programming language, assuming the data is there and the data is good, which is a big assumption.
For sure, yeah.
But assuming that, the programming language can be English language for us English speakers, which is phenomenal. It's really out of this world. And, Yeah, look, there's people going around saying, oh, we're all going to lose jobs and no one will be employed anymore. I don't kind of get the kind of rationale behind that economically, aside from many others.
Yeah.
But I do think you're right. It means that our potential to be creative, to solve problems is real. And I think the future is more and more of us being CEO-like rather than being out of work. And what I mean by that is CEO of our own lives, of our own professions, and of whatever it is that we're trying to build to solve problems or create.
Yeah, no, I totally agree and love that. I want to share kind of a quote from the opening pages of the book. I never shoot for perfection. I gave up on that a long time ago and said I shoot for better every day. I absolutely love kind of, that comment from you. What's shooting for better every day kind of look like practically for you, I guess, today, and also, when you're kind of in executive roles leading companies?
Yeah, I think from a CEO perspective, it means doing work every day to create an environment for your people that allows them to do their best work and also allows them to develop and grow in the work that they're doing. So the things that often get in the way of that are misalignment things that can happen in any walk of life. It could be lack of clarity. I mean, if you aren't clear about your why you're doing what you're doing, what your purpose and ambition is, that's tough.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to get that, but really trying to search for that and seeking that clarity is important. Priorities. Yeah. What are the most important things we have to get done today? Often what we do is we do too many things. We spread our efforts across things and give a little bit of attention. And as a result of that, we don't get as far as we want on anything. So prioritization is another example. And I can go beyond that, but it's really looking logically at what are the things we need to do to improve the position we're in today, to get closer to the outcome or aspiration we have, and are we doing the right work and doing more work on that? If you can do a little bit of work every day, even in a team you're on, just to improve how that team works together, you'll get really good gains from that make a big difference.
And it's kind of the balance of like from a CEO perspective on the business versus in the business, and it's always a challenge when you get caught up in the whirlwind. It's like making sure you're carving out some time to focus on the business and thinking about how you're getting scale, whether that's with your team or processes or products or innovation. I think that is certainly one of the challenges is making, and one of the really important things I've found anyways, is ensuring you carve that time out and really cherish it and make sure, to your point, you're kind of doing that every day.
Yeah.
One of the things you talk about in the book is sort of the art of saying no, I guess, as a follow-on from, when we're kind of talking about time and prioritization. In your experience, how have you kind of managed, I guess, the million things coming at you as a CEO? And, what are some of the practical things you did to kind of protect your time or processes you put in place to really enable you to kind of be able to, time box yourself and kind of focus on that progress day in and day out?
Well, that's a big question. It covers a lot. Just going back to what you said about being in the business or on the business, the way I like to do it, to look at that is to say, there's the why a business exists and there's what it does. The thing where you make the most ground is when you get into the how.
Yeah.
It's the how that matters. You can dream all day long, but it's how you're going to get to where you want to go that requires you to have discipline. A discipline over clarity and prioritization. So the best example of prioritization I ever saw was Steve Jobs when he came back to Apple. And Apple was in a really bad way. And what Steve did to really get Apple on the right track was actually not innovation. It was to cut 75% of the product line to focus. Yeah. And when you watch Steve on the videos on that you can now see of him talking about this, he talks about the fact that being focused is about saying no. So if you're not saying no to ideas that come your way, you're going to get into trouble.
For sure, yeah.
In terms of how do you make choices around that, well, there's a bit of an art to that. I think the first thing I would say is whatever it is, if you're not uncomfortable because you've said no to some things you'd like to do, then you're probably not prioritizing enough. But it really comes down to just thinking about what are the things that are most urgent and most important, and thinking about that urgent and important way of comparing things you can be doing. Another way to look at it is what's the effort I have to put in and what's the return I get. So if you've got 10 things you could be doing, if you run the urgent, important measure across them, or you run the effort to return or reward lens across them, you'll start to see that a few emerge as being the most important. And I would really encourage that you really put your effort into those top 2 or 3 things and doing them well.
How often, like on that, how often did you practically, I guess, run the ruler over those initiatives? Is that like a weekly thing, a monthly thing, a daily thing, where you're kind of thinking about the ROI, like your time and the ROI you're getting on that based on the kind of initiative? Or like, what does that kind of look like in a practical sense?
Yeah, look, in a professional sense, say as CEO of Xero, that was the annual planning cycle.
Okay, yeah.
However, when we hit COVID and we had to rebudget 3 times in a year, that meant that every time we changed the funding settings of the business, the investment settings, we had to go back and look at the list again.
Yeah.
And say, what are we going to do? So it's a big job and a challenging one for any organisation to do that and do it well. By the way, the most important thing in doing that is making sure you know what it's going to cost, what it's going to take to execute your strategy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of organisations pick a strategy, but they don't actually get into the detail of executing it, which will really bring you back to looking at the strategy and saying, hey, are we trying to do too much here?
Yeah.
So that's really the challenge, I think, in terms of prioritising at a corporate or a business level. So, it could be in a startup, you want to look at that every 3 months because you're learning as you're going. Bigger the business gets, maybe you can afford to do it once a year, but even then you'll be checking in and adapting depending on how things are going. But even for an individual, there's a really nice book that a friend of mine, James Laughlin, has just published called Habits of High Performance. And in that book, James talks about the fact that as an individual, to be a high performer, you've got to be really clear about why you're doing what you're doing and what your aspirations are. Then you've got something to prioritise against and decide, look, do I want to be watching a Netflix series every night, or do I want to put my effort into learning something new or doing some productive work? So they're the trade-offs we make as individuals.
Yeah, I went through a process recently, like I was in a workshop with a bunch of other executives, and it was very much about personal vision setting and a lot about personal values. That's kind of where they started, was with values. And I haven't read the book. I'll definitely check it out. But I think even kind of just going through that process of really thinking about what are your values now and what do you want them to be in 3 to 5 years, and then what's their vision you want and how you align that. When you kind of start from that at a holistic view across everything, work, life, personal relationships, things start to kind of make a bit more sense. And as you said, that kind of helps as a prioritization filter for kind of where you spend your energy and your time and your resources. So
absolutely.
One of the things I want to just sticking with prioritization and alignment. I think alignment is easy or easier, certainly, when things are all going to plan. You mentioned COVID recently. How do you kind of generate alignment when things aren't going to plan? When inevitably people aren't getting promotions, they're not unlocking their bonuses, they're perhaps not getting to work on the things that give them the most amount of joy in their roles. What have you seen organisations do really well in tough times to kind of, have alignment with their team?
Yeah, well, look, I think in all of these cases, whatever's happening is causing misalignment. Mm-hmm. And that misalignment could be everything from your product isn't quite the right fit for the market, right the way through to there's misalignment between 2 functions within your organisation that aren't collaborating effectively. I think the most important thing you have to do is really start by identifying it and facing into it, owning up to it, and making sure the communication is really flowing well in your organisation so that the issues are issues you can see. Once you can see the problem, then you can start to fix it. And they're all really different types of issues that you're dealing with, because ultimately I see the CEO role as being a big part of fixing misalignment in your organisation, which exists always. Yeah. There is never a time when there is no misalignment in your organisation. So I think understanding it and then really putting action plans in place with people around you to try and fix it is key. In terms of getting through those tough times, I think, it really comes down to being resilient. And, resilience starts with accepting the situation and not dwelling on it, but saying, okay, this has happened, right? And we're all human, and we'll go through that phase of going, how could this happen to me? The victim phase. And some people will wallow there for a long, long time. But what you want to do is snap out of that and appreciate it is what it is. Now what can I do about it? And so getting action-oriented can really make a big difference and start to feel like you know where you're going and you get through it. And that can be really, really helpful. And that's all I know is acceptance, action planning, and then execution, just making sure we're doing the things and we're sort of resetting ourselves around what the new future might look like.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one of the, kind of themes I just picked up reading your book and also kind of going back and reading, listening to people who've kind of worked with you in the past before is like this sense of clarity around everyone knowing their job. And, I often see, post-match, post-championship interviews where great sports captains are talking about, are asked, what made the organisation or the team successful, and they say, everyone just really kind of knew their job and were really focused on kind of doing their job. And I think, that seems easier in the sense where in sports you've got practice and you've got a position and it's sort of a little bit clearer. How have you seen that translate to kind of the corporate world in terms of what's it look like, everyone knowing their job and everyone kind of knowing the scoreboard? And just to kind of make it a bit more pointy, I'm talking like how much of it is about like the job description, the KPIs versus like the company strategy and how those two things kind of work together?
Wow, they all roll together. There's a whole range of things that kind of come to mind around this. I mean, first of all, you have to appreciate that it starts at the top. Mm-hmm. And the leadership team of any organisation has to be made up of people who are willing to sub-optimise their function for the broader good of their team. I mean, now, there's a real logical reason for this, right? This is not just warm, fuzzy stuff. This is the reason. And I learnt this when I was at 9MSN at the beginning of the digital media age. And we were building the first home pages of 9MSN. And the homepage that was built by our designers was not making anyone happy. Technology found it too hard to build. Sales didn't like it because of the lack of advertising space. Content didn't like it because the editorial space wasn't what they wanted. Marketing didn't like it because of the branding and navigation. Finance didn't like it because we were losing money every month and we weren't selling anything on the page. I mean, it went on. And I said to the designer at the time, I said, hey, I need you to go and talk to each function about what they want in the homepage. And then what we have to do is come up with something that's a great compromise. Now, the reality was the designer wasn't in a position to do that. I had to do that as the CEO, to get each of the functions to understand that for you to get the best outcome for the company, you all aren't going to get what you want. Because imagine what a homepage would look like if sales decided what it would look like. It'd be an ad, which might feel good in the short term, but long term it wouldn't work. So the critical thing is that I honestly believe that the optimization of a company is the sub-optimization of the parts. And that's why having executives who are there to serve each other, not selfish and self-oriented, is so important to building that great environment of a team, and also clarity and the alignment that comes with clarity. So I do think it starts with the top. In terms of how important it is to get that clarity, look, if you said to me, what's the greatest reward I've got for doing the hard work that I've done, which is facing into all the misalignment, having all the difficult conversations, making all the tough choices, and trying to fight through to get to a place where things were clear, is people really appreciate it. They love it when they work in an environment where there's clarity and where they can see that the leaders care about making sure that they're productive and effective in the work they're doing and developing in the work that they're doing. And that also points then to the quality of the people who manage people. And one of the things I think too many organisations compromise on is the quality and the capability of people management. It is really important because if you don't make that a clear priority for your people managers, they, like all of us, will get sucked in to doing the work they like to do, that's easy to do, which is the work that suits your past domain expertise. And once you get into management and beyond, your job is not to do that work. Your job is to help others, not to be the doer, to be the amplifier. And so that's really important.
And that's where they often talk about the star player isn't necessarily the great manager, right, for that exact reason. Sometimes you just want to let the star player kind of be a star doing the thing that they love doing, which is doing the work. And, while they might be a top performer in the business, that doesn't necessarily mean that they should kind of move into management. Sometimes that's kind of not the best course of action.
Absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about, they talk about, strategy as a bunch of decisions essentially. It's interesting kind of hearing you talk. The reframing for that maybe should be strategies about decisions and compromise, not because I think to your point, it's I hadn't really thought about the compromises you make, and certainly and the size of the organisations you've worked in, I imagine there's a lot of compromises people need to make, but I'm sure that ultimately the vision and the mission filter is kind of probably where those compromises are kind of laddered down from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing you can say about leading effectively as a CEO or a senior executive is the hard conversations and the choices you have to make, and they apply to everything. Your priorities. If you're going to have a good set of priorities, you're going to have difficult conversations about what you're not doing.
Yep.
If you're going to have alignment, you're going to have difficult conversations and choices to make about where you put your resources. And when you look at performance and how you're going, well, that's another whole domain.
Yeah.
So the real work of a CEO is to make sure that, and of course CEO is Change Execution Officer.
I love that.
Making sure that the detail required to execute a strategy and change
Love that.
is owned in the organisation and being executed. It's not work that they have to do every day, but it's work they have to make sure someone else is doing with them every day.
Yeah, love that. You say the winners are the ones who make change their superpower, not just survive it. What's the single behaviour you saw at Microsoft, Apple, Xero, where they turn this kind of constant disruption into momentum?
Well, look, it's if I look at Apple, it was clearly the ability to prioritise and go back to the roots of the company when it hit difficult times and be true to the idea of being different. If I look at Microsoft was a phenomenal example of a company that knows how to get the people around the world aligned with what the executives intend. So a great example of how you drive intent into action. And we just see the way that things have turned around for Microsoft in the last 10 to 15 years under Satya. That's just a story of a machine that could execute, that now has got its strategy really in the right place. So it's different elements, but all of this success comes down to the disciplines associated with leading and also with change, being good at change. So change is challenging though. It's challenging for us as humans. And so when I say make change a superpower, that's an aspirational statement because even today I'm still struggling with elements of it. But, it's one of those things where the more embracing of change you are, the less you look back into the past for answers, the more chance there will be that you'll get through things pretty well.
Yeah, no, definitely relate to that. We spoke about this a little bit before, and you talk about it a lot in the book, that it's not kind of the technology that's necessarily innovating, it's kind of the people that ultimately are innovating. If a CEO is listening today and wants to really lean into AI instead of fearing it, what's the first conversation they should have on a Monday with their SLT team, ELT team, or perhaps the entire organisation?
Yeah. Look, I think the very first thing for any exec or anyone is to use it, to use AI, because I think that then takes a lot of the fear and the mystery out of what's going on. I think the second thing that AI is going to do is finally bring discipline to organisations in the way that they make sure their people are doing the right work and they're doing that work well. I mean, if we treat AI the way we treat our people, AI is going to be a mess.
Yeah.
Like it's if you've got a people problem, you're going to have an AI problem.
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to force discipline into understanding the work that's being done and who is best to do it. And so that also then leads to understanding what AI does do, but what are your people doing?
Yeah,
What's the work your people are doing that I call human intelligence that makes a big difference or could make a big difference going forward? Because let's face it, the world backlog of software applications, of problems that need to be solved, of creative ideas that could become reality is massive.
Yeah.
And AI is going to enable us to get to that backlog. And so what we need to do is to grow our people. You know, young people are super smart now. They always were, but now they've got tools that make them even smarter. So why not this idea that people need to do meaningless work to progress in their careers before they're going to be ready to do meaningful work is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Get them going on meaningful works day one, and AI is going to accelerate that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's really about being human-centric. The more human-centric you are, the more successful you're going to be with AI and where technology takes us.
Yeah, I certainly agree with all of the points, but the whole, you have to kind of embrace and start executing yourself within AI. One of the things we did here at Social Garden is we ran a hack day. We're going to run another one soon, but obviously we were trying to come up with a bunch of ways we could use the technology to improve the business, but that as a way, we did a bunch of workshops leading up to the hack day, split everyone into teams of 4 and, gave them 5 business problems to work on essentially for the day. And I think I saw the behavior change from people kind of at the start of that journey, the people who were kind of in that camp of fear of kind of AI and what it was going to do to them, just completely change once they kind of went through that empowerment of actually using the tools and creating value. It was kind of a bit of an aha moment. So I think the whole advice around like execution, if you're a CEO or if you're just anyone who's listening to this and is thinking about how do you kind of lean into AI, of course, the simple answer seems to be just jump in and start kind of using the technology.
Yeah. And look, the reality of all this stuff will come home to roost. The fact that you really do need your data in good order, and that's easily said, not so easily done, particularly in larger enterprises. And then there is a lot of hype going around. I mean, be careful about what you believe when you're hearing it from people who make money out of flogging the product. I mean, you do have to be careful because, I mean, I was watching a TikTok video, this person talking about how easy it is to enable all these agents. And honestly, about a third of the way through, I just thought, are you kidding me? Do you really think that is a great... It was like the demo was so complex, it confused the hell out of me, right? So, and then you got to wire everything into everything else. But it is a spectacular new development that means that the potential of people is greater than ever again. Yeah,
love it. Look, we could kind of talk, for ages about these topics, but we're just about out of time. One thing we love to do here with our guests when we get them in is sort of 10 quick-fire short word answers. So I'll hit you with those, and then we can wrap up from there. So mornings or evenings?
Mornings for sure.
Love it. Biggest life mentor?
Dad.
Yeah, I think your book is dedicated to your father, so I thought that might have been the case. Your greatest achievement?
Boy, I have to say my daughters.
Love it. AI hype or AI here?
Hype that's here.
2025 or 1995?
Oh, boy.
I thought you might struggle with that one, actually.
Yeah, I do. I have to say 2025.
Okay, cool.
That's the right answer.
Favourite sports team?
New York Jets.
Cool, love it. Mac or PC? You've worked for both companies.
Yeah, I love them both. Okay. I mean, I'd say I'm using Mac.
Okay, cool. Scale or profit?
Scale.
Yeah, cool. University degree or DIY?
DIY.
Yeah, cool. Love it. Australia or New Zealand to live? You just told me you've moved back to Australia. You've spent a lot of time living in New Zealand.
I love New Zealand. I'm going to say New Zealand.
Hey, cool. Well, my Kiwi friends will love that. 10x or 10 years?
10x or 10 years? Not sure I get the...
In terms of, is it more important to focus on kind of the compounding growth of a company, or is it more about doing something consistently over 10 years?
I think you need both. You need that growth, but you also need consistency. So I'd probably say 10x though.
Yeah, love it. Yeah. Cool. Well, Steve, it's been wonderful talking to you. Really appreciate you coming in and having a chat with us in the green room. If people are wanting to connect with you, is LinkedIn the best place to...
LinkedIn and my website, stevevamos.com. So just my name, stevevamos.com. And also my book's available. Amazon's a good place to go get.
Awesome. And yeah, I can't highly recommend this book. As I said, I'm close to halfway through and I can already tell it's going to be one of my favorite business books. So thank you for sharing 40 years of wisdom kind of in this book. And yeah, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it.
Awesome.